Correct me if I'm wrong, but most people who enjoy watching Bridgerton are fans of the romance genre. We read romance books, swoon over romance movies, are addicted to romance shows, and set the soundtrack of our lives to romantic music. Or you're like me and only fit into two or three out of these four categories, in which case, we're still good. Of course, they are the minority who love Bridgerton for its historical reenactment of Regency England and everything it holds, which, who am I kidding? If you watch and enjoy Bridgerton, you know that there isn't a single historically accurate bone to be found in the show. It's as absent of historical accuracy as it is of properly redeemed characters. And at this point, it's two sides of the same coin that we've all just learned to accept and live with. Right? Right? Now, if you've watched Bridgerton season 3, then you're aware of the discourse. There are those who absolutely love it and think that the romance was spectacular and everything they ever dreamed of, which, good for them. I'm happy that at least one of us is pretty satisfied with how the season turned out. But then there are those like me who are still upset with how the show dropped the ball with regards Pauline's romance and the many ways they fumbled the bag, i.e., not giving the leads enough room and time to shine in their season to give us a believable romance arc or even give us the Bridgerton and Shondaland staple of an epic love confession. Because I don't know about you, but nothing Pauline said came close to "I burn for you," which was cheesy, I know, or "You're the bane of my existence and the object of all my desires," which was epic, a cultural reset, or "I will stand with you between the heavens and the earth. I will tell you where you are. Do you love me?" Which should be inducted into the Confession Hall of Fame. The acting, the tension, the bars, the resolution. Queen Charlotte ate and left no crumbs. We went from cheesy to epic to phenomenal, which meant that the bar was pretty high for me personally coming into season 3. And I'm still a tad bit miffed that we didn't get that, especially in a season that focused on not one, but two writers. How do we not get poetry and epic confessions when the two characters in the romance are bloody writers? But the other thing that everyone was looking forward to in Pauline's season was to see how the Lady Whistledown issue would be resolved. Now, as someone who had read the book, I of course knew that the truth would come out that Penelope Featherington is Lady Whistledown. But I wasn't sure how the show would do it exactly. Bridgerton, as we are all aware, has a very interesting way of changing certain things for the sake of added drama, i.e., the prolonged courtship of Edwina, which didn't happen in the books, and retaining certain things for reasons that still baffle me to this day, i.e., maintaining the sexual assault of Simon from the books. So I was waiting with bated breath to see how the show would resolve the issue and hopefully redeem my girl. Because as I've always said on this channel, this girl is a Penelope Featherington stan. And although I root for her and love her and believe in all her rights and wrongs, I am also aware that the change made to Penelope's motivations and actions in the show as Lady Whistledown compared to the books meant that Chopin, who is meaner and a tad bit more vindictive than her book counterpart, needed a little extra help in showing her character's redemption arc to bring her to a point where people felt that she had done enough to earn the forgiveness of those she had hurt with her writing. Because I might and can and have defended Penelope to the ends of the earth, But I will not hide or run away from the truth that she did cause some damage, and there are casualties to the things she's written in her column, which I hoped the show would address. And yet, Bridgerton didn't really do that this season. Matter of fact, Bridgerton didn't really do that in any of the seasons so far. It's a show that seems desperate in its avoidance of these issues. It loves the drama, but refuses to participate in any of the cleanup. Season 1, for example, had the mess of Simon lying to Daphne and basically taking advantage of the fact that Daphne knew diddly squat about sexual intercourse and how babies are conceived to lie by omission to her for the early parts of their marriage. Daphne, meanwhile, committed the very egregious act of sexually assaulting her husband that the show decided to depict in this weird girl boss, girl power way that makes zero sense to anyone who remotely understands consent, and why having your lead character proceed to not stop after her husband begs her to because she's on some angry crusade to have her suspicions confirmed and decides that this is a way to punish him is a big no-no. Season 2 has the bit with Anthony practically stringing Edwina along in his single-minded pursuit to find himself a bride that he would have no risk of falling utterly in love with, and vice versa, whilst making cow eyes at her sister, toying with both women's emotions because it was him toying with both the Sharma sisters. People always focus on how it hurt Edwina, but I personally think his indecisions and refusal to acknowledge what was going on with him and Kate, and all the ways he was inappropriate to her whilst courting her sister, was also hurtful to her. And just as I mentioned with Penelope, if the Sharmas had had an elder brother, he wouldn't have gotten away with that shit. But as I was saying, he toyed with the sisters until things exploded, with Edwina learning the truth and cancelling their wedding. She also refers to Kate as her half-sister when she's in that fit of rage at discovering the truth. And don't get me started on Edwina telling Kate that she's more kind-hearted than her and didn't ask for this because... Breathe, Noria. Just breathe. And then there's the bit with Colin and him laughing at the thought of dating Penelope Featherington with the men of the Ton, which broke her heart, and which was more cruel than it was in the books, because at least in the books, he was at home, laughing with his brothers. Penelope still felt humiliated, yes, but her humiliation was at least still contained with the men she grew up with and who, other than Colin, she practically considers her older brothers. And Benedict and Anthony did call out Colin for that, pointing out that Pen would be hurt and upset about it when they spot her, which is why Anthony walks Pen home and tries to talk to her about it to apologize. It was a statement said out of turn to other Bridgerton boys, who then proceeded to try and make it up to Pen, because to them, she is family and they don't want her hurt by them being dumbasses and cracking stupid jokes and needling their younger brother about his potential interest in her. The show makes it much bigger, and so it becomes even more catastrophic and hurtful to Pen. And it wasn't until that scene that it then hit me that Bridgerton as a show likes to make things so much worse for the sake of the drama. Like I stated earlier in the video, Penelope's writing in the books was never mean or unkind. What she did was merely write a gossip column about what was happening and to whom. It wasn't mean-spirited, and she didn't actually ruin anybody's life in the books. The only thing salacious about her column was that she was putting into writing the things everyone else was saying, but she did it in a funny, witty way that kept them entertained and coming back. There was no bit with Marina because, like I've stated before, Marina wasn't related to the Featheringtons in the book. She was instead a distant cousin of the Bridgertons, so there wasn't that bit with Marina in the books. And there wasn't the bit with her writing about Eloise's turn to radicalism either, because there wasn't the plot about the queen desperate to unmask Lady Whistledown. The plot to unmask her doesn't arise until Pauline's book, and it is championed by a bored Lady Danbury, not a vindictive Queen Charlotte. The courtship of Edwina only happens for a couple of chapters, after which story points had him marry Kate before we were midway through the book, instead of the elongated story that we were given in the show. Bridgerton makes all these smaller incidences much bigger for the sake of the drama, without realizing or recognizing that the bigger the mess, the bigger the drama, the longer it goes on for, the more you have to make up for it to clean up the mess, so the audience feels satisfied. If you were carrying, say, a keg of milk, like 5 liters worth, and it drops on the floor and shatters, it makes zero sense for you to reach for a handkerchief to attempt to clean up a spill of that magnitude. What you will be left with is a catastrophic mess that means nothing is resolved and no one is satisfied. And the thing about Bridgerton being desperate for drama, because that is the template that Shondaland knows and has sold across their different properties. They do the drama-driven storytelling very well. And unfortunately, Shondaland, being a production that pushes for needless drama in their shows, brought that to Bridgerton, forgetting the very important rule about the story they are adapting. Bridgerton as a concept is one that is a romance at its core, with drama elements all within a contained narrative story and structure, with a payoff that needs to align with what makes a romance story a romance. Now, this is the point where I diverge briefly to talk about the drama that happened with the Romance Writers of America panel, where there was the argument and disagreement about the difference between a romance and a love story and what constituted the former. Now, for those who were not online at that time or had no recollection that this was a huge debate, it was agreed that the difference between romances and love stories is that romances deliver on their promise of a happy ending or a happy ever after. Love stories, on the other hand, although they explore love and the hold it has on its characters and how transformative it can be, do not necessarily have a happy ever after or happy for now ending, which makes them love stories and not romances. For example, Nicholas Sparks writes love stories. They are beautiful portrayals of love that are heartbreaking in their resolution, whilst Julia Quinn writes romances. There will be a happy ever after with these characters having been fundamentally changed by their romance, because characters learning and growing through the course of a story is a prerequisite for any form of storytelling, really. After which they get to walk away into the sunset and into their best life. That is the premise within which Bridgerton has to operate. However, Shondaland is used to giving its audience more of a love story than they are romances. Whether we are talking Grey's Anatomy or Scandal or How to Get Away with Murder, yes, there are love stories contained within these shows, but you cannot in good conscience consider any of them a romance truly. Like I said earlier, they are mostly dramas with some romantic elements and the various love stories worked into them. So they are fundamentally different from Bridgerton, which means that the showrunners and writers have to make the template of the show work in some way whilst they retain the core identity of what makes a Shondaland show a Shondaland show. And they have to do so within the limits and constraints of an 8-episode season. Remember, Shonda Rhimes and her production are coming from network TV with its robust 22 episodes a season shoot to Netflix's the entire story must fit into 8 episodes format. But because drama is at the heart of Shonda's stories, what we instead get is this bloated adaptation where tension is built and these characters spend the entirety of the story caught in a would they or won't they loop that is fueled by the drama that the show creates. All with the hope and goal that by the end of the season, when we are wrapping things up, the problems that kept the two leads from being together are resolved so they can walk happily into the sunset together. And the show can still be considered a romance by the definition of the word. But not everybody has what it takes to be a romance writer. That shit is hard. Some people do better at love stories, some people do better at thrillers, and some do best at a drama with a sprinkle of romance. Looking at you, Shonda. Because see, the reason why some of us really enjoy reading romance is beyond the smut and the swoon-worthy confessions, which are amazing by the way. It's more than that. It's because romance novels and romance stories are character studies whose characters, by virtue of the stories being told, are meant to end up in a better place than they were from where they started. We often start the story meeting these characters at a particular point in their lives. Maybe it's a busy city worker who needs to take a break to find himself and learn that there is more to life than work. And it is best for him to take a break and smell the roses. And would you look at that? He goes back to his hometown where he runs into the boy he's always had a crush on back in high school, who is now the local florist and hopefully doesn't have a name that rhymes with or is synonymous with the word shroom. If you know, you know. Or maybe our lead character is an athlete, say a hockey player who had been burned by love and is convinced that everyone is how to get his money and finds himself falling in love with the team's doctor who sees him as nothing more than one of her patients and thus a spoiled athlete who always gets what he wants and she doesn't want the drama or the complication. And next thing we know, he's pursuing her because she sees him and he wants to be a better man for her, one who is committed and ready to settle down. You get the gist. Character development is a core part of romances because at their core, romance stories are about these characters working through their issues to find love at the end of the day. And that is where Bridgerton misses the mark, and why a lot of the audience feel very dissatisfied with how things played out with Penelope as Lady Whistledown. To write a romance like Bridgerton, where the drama is always big and sometimes devastating, there is a need to balance it as well with an equal amount of effort made to fix things and try and make amends. Because unless you're reading a dark romance or a specific genre of mafia romance, for example, the expectation is that these characters will ultimately end their story arc as being much better people than who we met at their first introduction at the start of the story. And to achieve that, there needs to be as substantial a time spent in getting our characters to that point as the time that was spent giving them the conflict that got them to that point in the first place. We don't get that with Bridgerton. The drama is there. The characters need to move from point A to point B. Simon needs to go from the anger and pain of his father's abuse, which is what drove him to make the vow to have no children, and his anger and betrayal at Daphne's assault, which was done to force his hand and cause him to break that vow, to the happy Simon we get at the end of the season, who is happy to hold his newborn son. Anthony has to go from the fear of his future wife being devastated by him dying young as he processes the trauma he experienced at his father's death, to being happy and in love and ready to jump in with Kate after Edwina walked away from their wedding. Penelope needs to go from keeping the secret identity of Lady Whistledown and battling with how she can maintain her life's work when a secret being revealed threatens to make that an impossibility, to revealing her identity to the old town and getting to keep her column and keep working. Colin needs to go from being angry with Pen about all the unkind things she had written in the past to being the supportive husband. And ideally, these characters should be able to do this, to move from their initial stance to where they end up at the end of the story in a way that feels believable and earned. It has been successfully done before by this same team in this same universe. Queen Charlotte, which is also a show produced and created by Shondaland, is able to do this successfully and with lesser episodes too. The question to ask then is how? And I do think that the answer is pretty straightforward and clear. It is easier to generate drama than it is to settle it. The drama contained within Queen Charlotte served the individual characters and their growth, and when it was time for the drama to be resolved, the show didn't do so in its last 5 to 10 minutes of runtime. No, it spanned several episodes. Georgette, which is my ship name for Charlotte and George that I think is super cute, had a ton of back and forth to get to their happy ending. They will take a couple of steps forward, run into some drama, resolve it, move a bit further along in their relationship, resolve whatever ordeal is standing in their way, and then move forward a bit more. The show balanced the progression of their relationship with the drama in a way that we had enough time to see them actively working to resolve their issues, and it was done in an open, confessional way that spoke to the heart of their conflict. George, terrified that he's losing his way and losing his mind, and Charlotte, promising that she would be the one standing with him to ground him, to help guide him, and to help him not lose his self or identity. And that is what is so beautiful about Georgette. They are given room to state their fears to each other, to resolve it. And they end up being stronger as a unit, which meant that by the time their happy ever after rolled around, we know they arrived at this point of them being stronger, better people, with the appropriate amount of work having been put in. George had to fight to have his romance with Charlotte recognized. He went to bat for her against his mother, against Dr. Monroe, and she did the same. Her showing up to set him free from the torture he was undergoing in the name of treatment was as much for him as it was for her. It was a grand gesture that was the culmination of the different little steps that had been taken to get them to that point in their romance. And I do think that that is what is missing with a lot of the resolutions we get or don't get in the other seasons of Bridgerton. I got a comment on my reactions to Unpopular Bridgerton Opinions video about how the show focuses on grand gestures which do not serve to give the audience a believable resolution to these issues that the characters are facing, and we instead should have gotten smaller acts that slowly build up to help the redemption arcs feel earned. And I agree and disagree at the same time. I think Bridgerton needs both. Smaller acts that culminates in a grand romantic gesture. So that way, we see the little steps that these characters are taking to make up for whatever it is that they are being redeemed for. And then they end it with this big gesture because that is a core staple of the romance genre, and a lot of us enjoy it. And Bridgerton with Queen Charlotte has shown that they can do both. Let's take the resolution of things with Penelope Featherington, for example. Imagine if instead of her just sending the letters to Queen Charlotte and her mother-in-law Violet, we instead got scenes where she writes to each of the people she had hurt irrevocably in the show. She tries to make amends, to explain her position and why she did what she did, yes, but to also let them know that she recognizes the hurt she had caused and is trying to do better and hopefully use her voice and platform for better. And this is something that takes place over the course of season 3B, that then culminates in her reveal at Philippa and Prudence's joint ball as Lady Whistledown. It wouldn't have felt like the entire town simply forgot everything that she had ever written up until that point. She would have resolved things and made up with those who were actually hurt by her prior to that point. That way, it is believable that everybody else doesn't bat an eye because at that point, they have no personal stakes in that game and their forgiveness isn't wanted anyway. And imagine if the person to help her make those amends is Colin, who stands by her and watches her put in that effort with everyone they know who her writing has hurt in some way. It would be a much better use of his time than the "I am never going to forgive you and will resent you" until the Queen stepped in and granted you forgiveness in public and now everything has been resolved turn that they had this character go through. If instead he had been there, watching her make amends, helping her reach out to those people, that way we are able to see supportive Colin, who falls even more in love with his wife and the strength of her character and convictions and the beauty of her writing. Like, it would have been much better and much more satisfying. But alas, that would mean putting in as much work in resolving the drama as was put into creating the drama. And that, unfortunately, isn't Shonda's forte. What do you think? Do you agree with what I had to say? Hit the like button if you do, hit the dislike button if you don't. I am here for the drama after all. Drop a comment, share this video if you think others should hear what I have to say. It all helps my channel grow and is incredibly supportive of my content. Speaking of support, a huge thank you to my patrons without whom I legit wouldn't be able to pay my bills. Thank you so much. If you would like to support me on Patreon, the link to do so is in the description box. I make new videos 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. All my videos drop at 5 p.m. EST. Whilst you wait for a new video from me, do check out the video I made on how Emily in Paris uses affairs to teach its characters and have them grow. Until my next video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.